The black woman's baby was taken as debt payment until a giant mountain man rode into town, his horse's hooves thundering against the dusty ground as desperate cries pierced the air. The townspeople watch with cruel satisfaction as the trembling mother reaches helplessly toward her infant, viewing her as nothing more than a burden whose fate is sealed, a life of loss with no hope of recourse. They assume she'll disappear into obscurity, broken by a system designed to crush those like her. But the massive stranger dismounting his horse recognizes something in her tear-stained face that no one else sees. Years ago, when death stalked him in the wilderness, gentle hands had pulled him back from the edge. Now those same hands tremble as they lose everything. Hidden beneath this moment of recognition lies a blood connection that could shatter every assumption about power in this unforgiving frontier town. Will the mountain man's arrival rewrite her destiny, or will both of them be destroyed by the dangerous secret that binds their fates together? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The morning sun cast long shadows across Cedar Ridge as Mava Winters bent over her sewing table. Her calloused fingers worked the needle through rough fabric, while 8-month-old Elena slept in a wooden crate nearby. The widow's cabin felt smaller each day as unpaid bills piled higher on the rickety table. A sharp knock shattered the morning quiet. Mava's hands stilled on the fabric as heavy boots scraped against her porch. She recognized that authoritative rap. Sheriff Morrison only knocked like that when carrying bad news. She opened the door to find Morrison flanked by 2 men in pressed suits. Behind them stood half the town, gathered like vultures sensing carrion. Their faces wore the same expression she'd seen at Samuel's funeral, pity mixed with satisfaction. Mava Winters. Morrison held up an official document sealed with red wax. By order of the Territorial Court, this property and all assets are hereby seized for debt payment to Judah Vex. The words hit her like physical blows. I'm working to pay what Samuel owed. Give me more time. Time's up. Morrison stepped inside without invitation. Territorial law allows seizure of all collateral, including dependents. Elena stirred in her makeshift crib. The baby's soft coos filled the sudden silence as the terrible meaning sank in. Mava's legs nearly buckled. You can't take my daughter. Law says otherwise. One of the suited men produced another document. Child becomes ward of the creditor until debt satisfaction. The crowd outside pressed closer to the doorway. Mava saw Mrs. Patterson's smug smile. She spotted Blacksmith Henderson nodding his approval. These people had watched her struggle for months without offering help. Now they gathered to witness her complete destruction. Clara Haywood pushed through the crowd. The schoolteacher's face was pale with shock. This can't be legal. Perfectly legal. Morrison's voice carried no emotion. Territorial Statute 847, human collateral for unpaid debts. Mava snatched Elena from the crib and pressed the baby against her chest. She's my child, my flesh and blood. She's payment for what your husband stole. Samuel didn't steal anything. He borrowed money for the farm. Farm failed. Debt remains. The crowd murmured their agreement. In their eyes, Mava saw the same judgment they'd passed on every struggling family. The same cold calculation that decided who deserved help and who deserved punishment. Her dark skin and Samuel's foolish optimism had marked them both as unworthy from the start. Fresh hoofbeats announced another arrival. The crowd turned as Judah Vex rode up on his prize stallion. The cattle baron's presence commanded instant respect. Men removed their hats. Women smoothed their skirts. Vex dismounted with practiced grace. His expensive coat and polished boots marked him as the wealthiest man in 3 counties. He'd built his empire by seizing opportunities others missed. Failed farms, desperate widows, unpaid debts. Sheriff Morrison. Vex tipped his hat with mock courtesy. I trust everything is in order. Yes, sir, Mr. Vex. Property and collateral ready for transfer. Vex's cold eyes fixed on Elena. The child will receive proper upbringing at my ranch. Christian values. Discipline. Everything she lacks here. Maeva backed against the cabin wall. Please, I'll work for you. Clean your house. Tend your animals. Anything. The debt requires this specific payment. She's just a baby. She'll be raised properly, fed well, educated according to her station. The words chilled Maeva more than outright cruelty. Vex genuinely believed he was performing a charitable act, rescuing Elena from poverty and improper influences. The baby would grow up calling him father while learning to despise everything about her real family. Morrison reached for Elena. Hand over the child. Maeva clutched her daughter tighter. Elena began crying, sensing her mother's distress. The sound pierced every heart in the crowd, except those that mattered most. Don't make this harder than necessary. Morrison's hand moved to his weapon. You've got no legal standing here. Clara stepped forward. There must be some alternative, another way to satisfy the debt. Law is law. Vex's tone brooked no argument. The child comes with me today. Thunder rolled across the clear sky. Every head turned toward the sound that didn't match the cloudless morning. Hoofbeats, heavy and rhythmic, moving fast toward town. The crowd shifted nervously as the sound grew louder. Morrison's hand stayed near his gun. Vex frowned at this interruption to his carefully orchestrated collection. A massive figure crested the hill outside town. The rider sat straight in his saddle despite his enormous size. His long hair whipped behind him as his horse galloped down the main street. Dust clouds marked his passage like smoke from a wildfire. He pulled up short at the edge of the crowd. The horse snorted and stamped as its rider surveyed the scene with cold calculation. The man stood at least 6.5 feet tall. His weathered face spoke of years in harsh country. Multiple cultures mixed in his features. Native cheekbones, European eyes. Something indefinably wild that civilization hadn't touched. Maeva's heart stopped. She knew that face. The stranger's gaze moved from the official documents to Morrison's threatening posture to Vex's expensive clothes. Finally, his eyes found Maeva clutching Elena against the cabin wall. Recognition flashed between them like lightning. The mountain man dismounted with fluid grace despite his massive frame. His boots hit the ground with authority that made the crowd step back instinctively. Even Morrison's hand moved away from his weapon. What's happening here? The stranger's voice carried the weight of distant thunder. Vex recovered first. His businessman's instincts kicked in as he sized up this interruption. Private matter. Legal debt collection. Doesn't look private with half the town watching. Morrison cleared his throat. Sir, this is official territorial business. Move along. The stranger ignored him completely. His attention focused on Maeva with laser intensity. 3 years melted away in that moment. She remembered finding him broken and bleeding by the creek, fever burning through his massive frame, death circling like a patient vulture. She'd carried water for days, fed him broth when he could barely swallow, changed his bandages when infection set in, asked for nothing, expected nothing, simply couldn't watch another soul die when she had power to prevent it. Maeva Winters. His voice softened slightly. Tomahawk. The name escaped her lips like a prayer. Vex's eyes narrowed. You know this man? We've met. Well, your reunion will have to wait. We have legal business to conclude. Tomahawk stepped closer to the cabin. The crowd parted like water before his approach. What kind of legal business involves taking a woman's baby? Debt collection. Her husband owed money. The child serves as collateral. How much money? Vex hesitated. The question was too direct, too practical. $800 plus interest, $950 total. I'll pay it. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Morrison smirked at the absurd offer. Mountain men lived on pelts and beans. They owned rifles and horses and little else. Vex's smile dripped condescension. That's very noble. Do you happen to have nearly $1,000 in your saddlebags? Tomahawk reached inside his coat. The crowd tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, he produced a leather portfolio thick with papers. Official seals caught the sunlight as he opened it. Bank draft for $1,200. Drawn on First National Bank of Denver. The laughter died instantly. Vex snatched the document and studied it with growing alarm. Morrison peered over his shoulder. Both men's faces went pale. This appears legitimate. Vex's voice had lost its commanding tone. It is legitimate. Tomahawk pulled out additional papers. Deed to the Lucky Strike silver mine. Territorial registration. Survey maps. All signed and witnessed. The crowd pressed closer to see these impossible documents. Maeva stared in shock as her world tilted again. The man she'd nursed back to health was wealthy beyond imagination. "Where did you get this?" Vex demanded. "Old prospector named Dutch Hendricks left it to me when he died. Took me 3 years to track down all the legal paperwork." Morrison examined the deed with shaking hands. "The Lucky Strike produced over 50,000 in silver last year. Closer to 70,000. Tomahawk's matter-of-fact tone sent shivers through the gathering. This year looks even better. Vex's calculating mind raced through implications. This changed everything. A wealthy landowner commanded respect, protection, legal standing that couldn't be dismissed or intimidated. Even if you have money, what's your interest in this woman's debt? Tomahawk pulled out one final document. This one made Vex stagger backward. Marriage certificate. Samuel Winters and Martha Crow. My mother's name was Martha Crow. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Samuel and Tomahawk were half-brothers. Elena was blood family to the richest man in the territory. That makes this baby my niece. Tomahawk's voice carried deadly quiet. And I take care of my family. The crowd erupted in whispers. Everything they thought they knew had just shattered. The struggling widow was connected to wealth and power beyond their comprehension. The baby they'd watched being seized was heir to a silver fortune. Mrs. Patterson's smug expression crumbled. Henderson removed his hat with sudden respect. Even the children sensed the shift in adult dynamics. Maeva felt the change like a physical force. Moments before, she'd been powerless prey surrounded by predators. Now the same people who'd gathered to watch her destruction offered nervous smiles and apologetic nods. The debt payment stands. Vex's voice cracked slightly. Legal documents were filed. Then I'll pay the legal debt. Tomahawk handed the bank draft to Morrison. $950. Full satisfaction of Samuel Winters' obligations. Morrison looked between the draft and Vex's furious face. Legal requirements were clear. Debt paid meant collateral released. No territorial law supported further seizure. Payment accepted. Morrison's announcement carried across the crowd like wildfire. Debt satisfied in full. Vex's face turned purple with rage. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Tomahawk stepped between Vex and Maeva. His size advantage became unmistakably clear. Unless you want to discuss it further. Vex climbed back on his horse without another word. His retreat brought scattered cheers from people who'd feared him for years. Power had shifted hands in minutes. Clara Haywood approached cautiously. Maeva, are you all right? Maeva looked down at Elena, still clutched against her chest. Her daughter was safe. Her home was saved. Her life had transformed from desperate poverty to protected wealth in the span of minutes. But questions burned through her relief. Why had Tomahawk really come to town today? What did he want from her? And what would this sudden change cost her independence? Tomahawk's eyes met hers with unexpected gentleness. Pack what you need. Both of you are coming home with me. The mountain trail wound upward through pine forests that seemed to touch the sky. Maeva rode behind Tomahawk on his massive horse, Elena secure in her arms. The baby had stopped crying once they left town. Even she seemed to sense the safety radiating from their protector. 3 hours of steady climbing brought them to a hidden valley. Tomahawk's cabin sat nestled against towering granite cliffs like it had grown from the mountain itself. Smoke curled from the stone chimney. Gardens stretched in neat rows beside a crystal stream. It's beautiful. Maeva's first words since leaving Cedar Ridge carried genuine wonder. Tomahawk helped her dismount with surprising gentleness for such massive hands. Gets lonely sometimes. The cabin interior revealed careful craftsmanship, hand-carved furniture, stone fireplace large enough to heat the entire space, shelves lined with books and mining equipment. Everything spoke of a man who built to last. But Maeva's attention caught on details that didn't fit. Women's clothing folded neatly in a cedar chest, a child's wooden horse sitting by the fireplace, beaded moccasins too small for Tomahawk's feet. You weren't always alone here. Tomahawk's shoulders tensed. He busied himself stoking the fire while Maeva explored with growing curiosity. The evidence painted a clear picture of previous occupants. Female occupants. A family that had vanished. Elena gurgled happily as Maeva settled her on a soft blanket. The baby's contentment in this place seemed almost supernatural, like she belonged here despite never seeing it before. Their names were Morning Star and Little Fox. Tomahawk's voice carried pain so deep it made Maeva's chest ache. My wife and daughter. Maeva stopped her exploration. The past tense hit like a physical blow. What happened to them? Cavalry raid 5 years ago. I was working the mine when soldiers came through. Said they were relocating hostile tribes. His massive hands clenched into fists. Found our cabin burned when I got back. Bodies were gone. Tracks led north. The tragedy explained everything. His isolation, his reluctance to speak, the careful preservation of their belongings like shrine artifacts. Tomahawk had been frozen in grief for 5 years. Did you search for them? Searched everywhere. Every reservation, every fort, every town between here and Canada. His voice cracked slightly. Found nothing. Like they vanished from the earth. Maeva's heart broke for this gentle giant carrying such enormous pain. She understood loss. Samuel's death had nearly destroyed her, but losing a child was suffering beyond imagination. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate but necessary. You saved my life once. Only seemed right to return the favor. Memory flooded back with crystal clarity. She'd found him collapsed by Willow Creek. Bear claws had torn his chest and shoulder to ribbons. Infection was setting in. Death circled closer with each fever spike. Most people would have taken his weapons and left him to die. Supplies were too precious to waste on strangers, especially strangers who looked different, spoke different languages, belonged to cultures the white world feared. But Maeva couldn't watch anyone suffer when she had power to help. Her grandmother's medical knowledge had guided her hands as she cleaned wounds and fought infection. She'd given him her own food, shared her blanket, stayed awake for 3 nights monitoring his fever. You never asked for anything. Tomahawk's observation pulled her from memory. Never expected payment or gratitude. Just helped because helping was right. Anyone would have done the same. No. They wouldn't have. The truth of that statement settled between them like a bridge. Both had experienced the world's casual cruelty. The way people turned away from suffering, that wasn't their responsibility. The calculations that decided who deserved help and who deserved abandonment. Over the following days, routine developed naturally. Tomahawk taught Maeva mountain survival. How to read weather patterns, track animals, identify edible plants, skills that could mean life or death in harsh country. Maeva helped organize his chaotic household, mended clothes that had accumulated tears, cooked meals more elaborate than beans and hardtack, gradually coaxed him into talking about happier memories. Evening became their favorite time. Elena would fall asleep between them as firelight danced across cabin walls. Tomahawk would read slowly from his books while Maeva corrected his pronunciation. She'd learned reading from her grandmother. He'd taught himself from mining manuals and legal documents. You're a natural teacher. Tomahawk struggled with a particularly complex passage about mineral rights. You're a quick student. Most men wouldn't admit they need help. Pride is expensive. Can't afford it up here. Their growing friendship felt natural despite its unusual circumstances. 2 damaged people finding healing in unexpected partnership. Elena thrived on the attention from both adults. The baby's laughter brought joy back to rooms that had echoed with grief too long, but shadows gathered beyond their mountain sanctuary. Clara Haywood arrived one morning with news that shattered their peaceful routine. She'd ridden hard through dangerous country to deliver her warning. Vex is spreading lies about you both. Clara's horse lathered with sweat from the desperate ride. Claims Tomahawk kidnapped you. Says he's holding you against your will. That's ridiculous. Maeva stepped out of the cabin with Elena on her hip. I'm here by choice. Doesn't matter what's true. He's got people believing his version, talking about rescue missions. Tomahawk emerged from the mine shaft covered in silver dust. What kind of rescue missions? Armed men, federal marshals. He's painting himself as a concerned citizen protecting helpless women. Worse news followed. Vex was challenging Tomahawk's mine ownership through corrupt territorial courts, forging documents that predated Dutch Hendrick's claim, building a legal case to seize everything. There's something else. Clara's voice dropped to urgent whisper. His reform school. I've been watching it. Children go in, but never come out. Clara's words hung in the mountain air like storm clouds. The reform school operated behind high walls on Vex's eastern property. Children from failed families disappeared into its confines. Official records claimed they were being educated and civilized, but no graduates ever emerged to tell their stories. How many children? Maeva's voice carried the steel of maternal protection. At least a dozen, maybe more. Clara's hands shook as she accepted coffee from Tomahawk. Native kids mostly, some from families who couldn't pay debts. Tomahawk's massive frame went rigid. Any Ute children? I've seen a girl who might be 12 or 13 years old. She works in their garden sometimes. Hope and terror warred across Tomahawk's weathered features. 5 years of searching had led to this moment. The possibility that little Fox had survived the raid, that she was imprisoned mere miles from where he'd grieved her death. Maeva recognized the dangerous light in his eyes. We need proof before we act. I need to see her. And if it's not your daughter, if Vex is waiting for exactly this kind of desperate move? Clara set down her coffee cup with determination that surprised them both. I can get inside. Teachers visit the school monthly for inspections, mostly for show, but I have legitimate access. Too dangerous. Tomahawk's protective instincts extended to anyone who helped his family. Vex suspects you're helping us. He suspects everyone of everything. Paranoid men make mistakes. They spent the morning planning careful reconnaissance. Clara would conduct her scheduled inspection while noting security measures and gathering information about the children. Tomahawk and Maeva would position themselves nearby to provide support if things went wrong. The reform school sat in a valley that felt wrong from the moment they approached. High wooden walls topped with iron spikes surrounded buildings that looked more like a prison than a place of learning. Guards patrolled the perimeter with rifles and hard expressions. Tomahawk and Maeva took positions in the tree line overlooking the compound. Elena slept peacefully in a makeshift carrier while they watched Clara approach the main gate. The baby's presence seemed to calm both adults despite the dangerous circumstances. She shouldn't be doing this alone. Maeva's organizational mind cataloged every guard position and potential escape route. Clara's tougher than she looks. Through his spyglass, Tomahawk tracked Clara's progress inside the walls. She moved with the confidence of official authority, while her sharp eyes recorded everything. The children she encountered looked undernourished and fearful. Their clothes were identical gray uniforms that stripped away individual identity. Then Clara stopped beside a garden plot where older children worked under guard supervision. A girl with long black braids looked up from pulling weeds. Even at distance, Tomahawk's sharp intake of breath was audible. Is it her? Can't tell for certain, but something about the way she moves. The girl glanced toward the tree line as if sensing observation. Her posture straightened with unconscious pride that reminded Tomahawk of Morning Star, the same stubborn tilt of the chin, the same graceful economy of movement. Clara finished her inspection and departed without incident, but tension followed her from the compound like a visible shadow. They regrouped at a predetermined location miles from the school. Her name is Ayana now. They changed it from whatever she was called before. Clara's report confirmed their worst fears. She remembers fragments of another life, but they've convinced her that her original family is dead. Did you see a birthmark? Crescent shape on her left shoulder? I couldn't get that close. But Tomahawk, there's something else. That girl isn't the only one who might have family looking for them. Clara had documented a systematic operation that stretched far beyond simple education. Children were taken from families using manufactured legal pretexts. Their identities were erased and replaced with new names and fabricated histories. They provided free labor while being indoctrinated to serve Vex's expanding empire. We need the federal marshal. Maeva's practical nature sought legal solutions. Evidence this comprehensive should be enough for a proper investigation. Vex owns the territorial marshal. Federal authority is 2 weeks away by messenger. Clara's inside knowledge painted a grim picture of local corruption. Those children don't have 2 weeks. Tomahawk studied the hand-drawn map Clara had created of the compound's layout. His military experience from years of fighting hostile territory showed in how he analyzed defensive positions and potential weaknesses. There's a way in through the drainage tunnel on the north side, but we'd need a diversion to get the children out safely. What kind of diversion? Something that draws every guard away from the dormitories, something Vex can't ignore. They spent the evening refining their plan. Tomahawk would create a distraction at the mine office where Vex kept his forged legal documents. While guards responded to that threat, Maeva and Clara would evacuate the children through the drainage tunnel. This could go very wrong very quickly. Maeva voiced what they all understood. If we're caught, Vex will have legal justification to destroy us. If we do nothing, those children disappear forever. Tomahawk's response carried the weight of 5 years searching for his own lost daughter. Elena woke and reached tiny fingers toward the firelight. Her innocent trust reminded them what they were fighting to protect. Not just their own family, but all the families Vex had torn apart through systematic cruelty. The next morning brought news that changed everything. A rider approached their camp with a message that would force their hand sooner than planned. The rider brought devastating news. Vex was moving the children that very night. Wagons were being loaded for transport to a facility 300 miles north. Once they crossed territorial lines, legal rescue would become impossible. We move now or we lose them forever. Tomahawk checked his rifle with grim efficiency. Maeva strapped Elena securely to her chest in the carrier Tomahawk had fashioned from deerskin. The baby would have to come with them. No time existed to find safe shelter, and separation was unthinkable. Clara mounted her horse with nervous determination. The guards changed shift at sunset. That's our window. They approached the compound as golden light faded behind the mountains. Tomahawk split off toward the mine office while the women continued to the drainage tunnel. Their timing had to be perfect. Too early and the guards would be alert. Too late and the wagons would be gone. The tunnel entrance lay hidden beneath overgrown brush exactly where Clara's map indicated. Water trickled through the narrow passage that led under the compound walls. Maeva crawled through first. Elena pressed against her chest in the confined space. They emerged inside the compound near the dormitory buildings. Children's voices drifted through barred windows. Quiet conversations in multiple languages. Whispered prayers in tongues their captors had tried to erase. Clara produced a key ring stolen during her inspection visit. The dormitory door opened with barely audible protest. Inside, 24 children ranging from 6 to 14 years old looked up with mixture of hope and terror. "We're here to take you home." Maeva's whispered words sparked immediate response. Some children rushed toward freedom. Others hung back, conditioned to expect punishment for any unauthorized movement. Years of captivity had trained them to distrust sudden changes. Then Ayana stepped forward from the shadows. Up close, there was no mistaking her heritage or the intelligence burning in her dark eyes. She moved with unconscious grace that matched every story Tomahawk had told about Morning Star. "Who are you?" Ayana's voice carried authority beyond her years. "Friends of your father. My father is dead. No. He's been searching for you for 5 years. Ayana's carefully constructed emotional walls cracked slightly. Memory struggled against indoctrination as fragments of a different life surfaced. A large man with gentle hands. Stories told by firelight, the scent of pine smoke and silver dust. Prove it. Maeva pulled out a beaded bracelet Tomahawk had kept among Morningstar's belongings. Recognition flashed across Ayana's face like lightning. Her small hands trembled as she touched the familiar pattern. He kept this. He kept everything. Waiting for you to come home. Distant explosions shattered the night silence. Tomahawk had reached the mine office and created his promised distraction. Shouts echoed across the compound as guards rushed toward the emergency. We have to move now. Clara herded the children toward the drainage tunnel. Stay quiet and stay together. Ayana took charge of organizing the younger ones with natural leadership. She'd protected these children for years inside the compound. Now she guided them toward freedom with fierce determination. The tunnel passage proved challenging with so many small bodies. Maeva crawled backward, pulling the smallest children, while Elena remained miraculously quiet against her chest. Clara pushed from behind while Ayana ensured no one was left behind. They emerged outside the walls just as more explosions lit the night sky. Tomahawk had done his job well. Every guard in the compound was racing toward the mine office emergency. The children's escape went completely unnoticed, but their celebration proved premature. Vex himself appeared at the tunnel entrance with a hunting rifle and murderous expression. He'd anticipated this exact scenario and positioned himself to intercept any rescue attempt. Bring those children back now. Maeva stepped protectively in front of the group. Elena finally began crying, sensing her mother's fear through their bond. The baby's distress added urgency to an already desperate situation. These children don't belong to you. They belong to whoever can feed and house them. Their families couldn't manage that basic responsibility. You stole them using forged documents. Vex's laugh held no humor. Prove it. I have legal custody awarded by territorial courts. You have nothing but accusations. Ayana moved beside Maeva with surprising courage. I remember now. My real name was Little Fox. This man burned our cabin and took me while my father was working. Lies taught by desperate criminals. I remember my mother's beadwork, my father's stories about the Silver Mountain, the way he sang Ute lullabies. More memories surfaced as Ayana spoke, details no amount of coaching could have provided. The specific pattern of Morningstar's jewelry, the location of hidden caves where Tomahawk stored mining equipment, family stories passed down through generations. Other children began adding their own testimonies, fragments of suppressed memories breaking through years of systematic indoctrination. Names, faces, and traditions they'd been forced to abandon suddenly returned with crystalline clarity. Vex's rifle wavered as he realized the children themselves provided unshakable evidence of his crimes. Their testimonies would destroy him in any honest court. His entire empire depended on silencing these witnesses permanently. No one will believe children over a respected businessman. They'll believe federal marshals. Clara's voice carried triumph that made Vex spin around in shock. 3 men in federal uniforms emerged from the darkness with weapons drawn. The messenger who'd brought news of the transport had also carried Clara's detailed report to territorial headquarters. Justice had finally arrived in Cedar Ridge. Marshal Thompson stepped forward with practiced authority. His weathered face had seen enough frontier corruption to recognize it instantly. Behind him, Deputies Martinez and Cole kept their weapons trained on Vex while scanning for additional threats. Judah Vex, you're under arrest for child trafficking, document forgery, and conspiracy to defraud the territorial government. Vex's rifle clattered to the ground as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Years of intimidating others through wealth and connections crumbled in moments when faced with federal authority he couldn't buy or threaten. This is a misunderstanding. These children are legally under my care. We'll let a federal judge decide that. Thompson's tone brooked no argument. The children clustered around Ayana as she translated the marshal's words into multiple languages. Years of suppressed hope blazed to life in their faces. Some wept openly, others maintained suspicious caution born from too many false promises. Tomahawk arrived running from the mine office, his massive frame moving with surprising speed. Silver dust still covered his clothes from the diversionary explosions he'd created. His eyes immediately found Ayanna among the group of rescued children. Father and daughter stared at each other across 5 years of separation and grief. Ayanna had grown from a 7-year-old child into a young woman who'd learned to survive in hostile territory. Tomahawk had aged beyond his years, searching for someone he'd begun to fear was lost forever. Little Fox? Ayanna's careful composure finally cracked. She ran toward him with the desperation of a child who'd been brave too long. Tomahawk caught her in arms that could crush stone but held her with infinite gentleness. "I knew you'd come." Her words were muffled against his massive chest. "They said you were dead, but I knew you'd come." Maeva watched the reunion through tears while Elena gurgled contentedly in her arms. The baby seemed to understand something important was happening. Her tiny hands reached toward the emotional scene with innocent curiosity. Marshall Thompson documented Vex's crimes with methodical precision. Clara provided written testimony about the systematic child trafficking operation. The rescued children added their own accounts of separation from families and erasure of cultural identities. The territorial court system needs complete investigation. Thompson's preliminary findings revealed corruption reaching the highest levels of local government. Judges, sheriffs, land officials. This conspiracy involved dozens of people. Dawn broke over the compound as the full scope of Vex's criminal enterprise became clear. Forged documents had stolen thousands of acres from native families. Fraudulent debt contracts had destroyed dozens of homesteads. The reform school was merely the visible tip of a massive criminal operation. What happens to the children now? Maeva's practical nature focused on immediate needs. Those with surviving families will be reunited. Others will need proper placement. Ayanna stepped forward with the leadership skills that had protected younger children for years. Some have no families left. The raids killed their parents. They need homes. We'll find homes. Tomahawk's simple statement carried absolute conviction. The return journey to Cedar Ridge became a caravan of healing families. Some children rode with parents who'd traveled hundreds of miles following desperate rumors of their whereabouts. Others stayed close to Ayanna, who'd become their protective older sister during captivity. Maeva organized supplies and comfort for the younger ones, while Elena charmed everyone with her innocent smiles. The baby's presence seemed to symbolize hope for a better future built on justice rather than exploitation. Clara rode alongside the group documenting stories that would ensure these crimes were never forgotten. Her teacher's instincts recognized the importance of preserving testimony before trauma faded into selective memory. Cedar Ridge had transformed during their absence. News of Vex's arrest had spread through the territory like wildfire. Families who'd suffered under his corrupt system emerged from hiding with their own stories of abuse and theft. The territorial courthouse overflowed as federal investigators processed hundreds of fraudulent documents. Property stolen through forged deeds was returned to rightful owners. Families separated by false legal judgments were reunited under proper authority. Mrs. Patterson approached Maeva with shamefaced apology. "I'm sorry we didn't help when you needed it. Help now." Maeva's response carried no bitterness. These children need families, food, education, medicine. The community's guilt transformed into purposeful action. Families opened their homes to orphaned children. The church organized supplies and clothing drives. Even former skeptics contributed whatever they could manage. Tomahawk established a fund using profits from his silver mine to support affected families. Legal fees, medical care, and educational expenses were covered without question. He understood that wealth carried responsibility to lift others from poverty he'd escaped through fortune. 6 months later, their mountain homestead had expanded into a small village. Tomahawk built additional cabins for families who preferred mountain life to town politics. Gardens flourished in the fertile valley soil. Children's laughter echoed off granite cliffs that had known only solitude for years. Ayanna thrived in her role, teaching younger children while learning advanced subjects from Clara, who visited monthly. Her intelligence and compassion made her a natural educator despite years of interrupted schooling. Elena took her first steps in the cabin where two cultures had learned to blend seamlessly. She called Tomahawk Papa and Ayanna Sister, with unconscious acceptance that family was defined by love rather than blood. Maeva opened a school that welcomed children regardless of background or heritage. Her classroom became a place where multiple languages were celebrated rather than suppressed. Traditional knowledge from various cultures enriched the standard territorial curriculum. Evening still brought them together around the fireplace, where this unlikely family had first formed. Tomahawk would read stories while Elena played between them, and Ayanna worked on beadwork patterns her grandmother had taught Morning Star decades before. They'd built something unprecedented in frontier territory, a community where justice mattered more than profit, where different cultures strengthened rather than threatened each other, where children grew up believing family was created through choice and sustained through loyalty. The mountain valley held their voices as they planned for futures that seemed impossible just months before. Love had conquered systems built on cruelty. Family had triumphed over forces designed to destroy it. Hope had taken root in ground watered by generations of tears.